This is our first meeting, our first public meeting, Achieving Zero Waste, the Future of Waste Management. I'm David Maybury, Warden of Oxford County and Mayor of Southwest Oxford, and I'm delighted to be here this evening and to see so many familiar faces here in the audience. I'm also pleased to welcome our viewers at home, as tonight's meeting is being broadcast online as a webinar. This evening, we're going to be discussing the issue of waste in Oxford County and how we can reduce the amount of waste that we are burying in our landfill. It's an important question that we need to answer as a community as we look to be a leader in protecting our environment and hopefully never having to open another landfill in the county. On that note, I would also like to welcome OPAL, Oxford People Against Landfill, for rearranging the location of their meeting tonight so that they were able to join us to hear about this important waste diversion initiative. But I would also preface the purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the issues around how we as a community are handling our waste, and specifically whether or not or how we pursue what we're presenting to you as the preferred technology. Tonight is not about the Southwestern landfill proposal by Walker Environmental, although I know it's an issue that's near and dear to the hearts of many of you. Walker's proposal is not part of this public meeting. If you have questions, there will be a time for one-on-one discussion at the conclusion of tonight's meeting with the presenters. But before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge some of the, in fact, all of the elected officials here in the room tonight. We have Mayor Trevor Birch from the City of Woodstock and Councillor Sandra Talbot. We have Mayor Ted Comiskey from Ingersoll, Mayor Larry Martin and Deputy Warden Larry Martin from Norwich, and somewhere Jim Palmer, right there in the front row, Jim Palmer, council from the Township of Norwich as well. I now want to introduce to you tonight's presenters. As mentioned, we're discussing a recommended waste technology to divert waste from the landfill. Oxford County Public Works staff have been working to come up with this potential solution over the past year. Tonight you will hear from the Director of Public Works, David Simpson. During the question and answer session, you may also hear from our Manager of Waste Management, Frank Gross, and Supervisor of Waste Management, Dave Vermeeren, who have been working on this project as well, and they're sitting right behind me. Throughout the process, the potential solutions have been discussed by Zero Waste Oxford, one of the committees of Future Oxford. Chair of that committee, Brian Smith, will be discussing their role and the background. And finally, Oxford County CAO Peter Crockett is here this evening to discuss the context of the proposed technology and how this fits into the Future Oxford Community Sustainability Plan. And to help keep us on track tonight and make sure that we're staying there and fielding questions from the audience and our home viewers, we're delighted to have Alicia Evans from ACOM to help facilitate tonight's meeting. I'll now to call on Alicia to go over the ground rules and start the meeting. Alicia, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. As Warden Maybury mentioned, my name is Alicia Evans, and I am your facilitator for this evening. It's my job tonight to help ensure that the evening flows smoothly. Your time is valuable, and we want to make the most of it. Before we get started, we'll take care of some important logistics. As you may have seen, there are 2 fire exits in this room, one behind you, back through the main entrance, and of course one behind me to the right of the room. In addition, the washrooms are back out in the lobby and down to the left. So this evening's agenda will unfold in 3 parts as follows. So first, we will hear from the presenters that Warden Maybury introduced, who will provide an overview of Future Oxford, information about Zero Waste Oxford and the Waste Technologies Review process, and details about the preferred waste reduction and recovery technology approach. And I'll ask you to please hold any questions you have until after these presentations. And following the presentations, we will hear from you in the room as well as those of you at home. And I will provide more guidelines as to how we will have that discussion in just a moment. And then, of course, finally, following the question and answer period, we will have some time for you to speak with the project team members one-on-one back in the lobby around the display boards. So the purpose of this evening's meeting is not only to share information with you about the preferred waste technology, but also to answer your questions and get your thoughts and feedback about these recommendations as the project moves forward. And there are a number of ways that you can ask your questions and provide your feedback this evening. So when we open the floor following the presentations, we will invite those of you with a question or comment to step up to the microphone that is in front of the seating area there. And we will take one question at a time, and then we'll let the team members respond. And if you're unable to get to the microphone, just raise your hand and I will bring one to you. Now, we will also be taking questions and comments from those of you at home. And so from those of you joining by webinar, please type your questions or comments into the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. And at various points throughout the evening, I will read back some of those questions and we will get some answers from the project team. And if you would rather not ask your questions or provide comments publicly, you can do so one-on-one following the question and answer period. We have reserved about 30 minutes near the end of the meeting for that. As well, you can provide your comments through the survey that you should have for those of you at the room, or online through Speak Up Oxford. And I will provide a brief reminder of all of this information before we get into the question and answer period. But at this point, I'd like to pass it over to Peter Crockett, CAO of Oxford County.
Thank you, Alicia. My opportunity tonight is to talk a little bit about where we are sitting and put a little bit of context, if you will, into the discussion. It really started from the perspective of back in 2013 when County Council adopted their first strategic plan. So that was a corporate strategic plan for our organization, but it laid the framework for beginning to look at major decisions from an economic, community, and environmental perspective. That, in fact, led to beginning to look at a community-wide sustainability plan in 2014, which was actually a grassroots-based endeavor using residents from across the county to begin to shape what is the future of Oxford look like and what does it all contain or hold. The result is the graphic that's up on the plan and everything behind that. The Future Oxford Community Sustainability Plan is in reality a plan that suggests very strongly that strong, vibrant economies support healthy, well-balanced communities, and they all exist within a healthy and clean environment. Those three pillars are fundamental to broader sustainability and are well entrenched within the plan itself. And to try and explain the plan a little bit further, I'm going to use the help of a video that's about 2.5 minutes long. So a strong and vibrant economy, healthy well-being within our communities, all existing within a clean and healthy environment. That's what the sustainability plan is all about and what it's trying to achieve. Just to put a little perspective on what's been going on since within the community, right around the time as the draft plan was being adopted or looked at from a county council perspective, County Council also adopted a 100% renewable by 2050 commitment. That commitment is moving forward in a number of fronts, one of which is our building transformation programs that are going on. We are building passive house standard community housing. We're building net zero administration buildings. We're looking at EnerFit standard conversions within existing buildings. The point being, there's a huge amount of opportunity within the way we use energy within our buildings to be able to move forward. We've also been doing a lot of work around restoration of wetlands within our community. The county owns some 600 acres of land in southwest Oxford and Norwich Township, of which through our community partnerships and industry partnerships, we're able to leverage and advance and improve the wetland restoration programs within those 600 acres. We've also been very active on the transportation front, both from an electric vehicle mobility perspective. Oxford County introduced the first hybrid electric ambulances in 2017, and it also introduced the first compressed natural gas snowplows in North America in the fall of 2017 as well. On the community well-being perspective, the commitments to understand exactly where we are on that sustainability continuum, if you will, was recognized very early on, and we've been working our way through a number of community well-being studies, work to be able to understand where it is we are on that broad continuum of quality of life and community well-being that we're trying to move forward on. The third report on that work is about to be released in the next few weeks. As one of its latest commitments, County Council also committed to achieving zero poverty. While an audacious goal, there's no question about it, it's the right thing to do, and it's part of the broader community well-being for everyone within our community. We believe very strongly that all of this work brings together vibrant economies and will lead to community well-being and a clean environment. The Legacy Fund has been established. We've been working with the Oxford Workforce Development Partnership, and we're looking at a sustainability cluster as a way of recognizing and taking hold of some of the economic and social enterprise opportunities that this work brings with it. We've also been heavily involved as a community on the Southwestern Ontario transportation front, trying to make sure that we stick our oar in the water, if you will, and shape the way that regional transportation should happen within Southwestern Ontario. Without question, intercommunity mobility and regional mobility is one of the largest issues in a small urban rural environment. And of course, the topic of tonight is all about zero waste, and the commitment Council has made to zero waste, to achieving a 2100-year landfill life and getting us to zero waste in our community. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. All of this information is available at futureoxford.ca and at oxfordcounty.ca at the Speak Up web page if you're looking for a little bit more information on that. I'm going to now turn it over to Brian Smith, and he'll talk about the Zero Waste Oxford part.
Thank you, Peter, and thanks to everyone. So this first slide, I want to point out that I'm the co-chair of this, and my co-chair is in the room, and there are some members of this committee in the room. So hats off to them for the work they have done, which has been significant and has taken lots of time and lots of energy and lots of intelligence. So the Zero Waste Oxford Committee is in fact an action committee that is getting the work done around a number of things. And some of those things include doing a waste audit to get a handle on what it is that people in the county put out in terms of the residential thing, but also looking at industry partners and what they are actually putting out as well as waste. Because one of the things that will help you deal with waste is to understand what it is that you're dealing with. So while it is in the environmental pillar, this Zero Waste Oxford action group, we're aware that that, it also has influence within the economic activity that grows from a circular economy, which is part of the background to this. There is a document from the province that is law that talks about a circular economy and how we should be moving towards a waste-free Ontario. So this is an area in which Oxford County and the Zero Waste Committee is showing leadership. And that committee has some staff on it as well, and has public members on it as well. And I just mentioned that all of those people, the engineers and the health professionals on there, have far better credentials than I have. So that group is doing work around how, by moving forward on zero waste, we in fact boost our economic thing, and that we also recognize that it moves us forward as well on the community pillar, and in particular, if you're talking about the draft food and organic waste framework, that it draws the attention of people here and more broadly across the province to the fact that when you have food going to waste in a context in which there are hungry children and adults, then you need to solve a couple of problems by making one set of sensible actions there. I want to talk in particular about the multi-criteria assessment tool as relates to this. So we did an audit of the mixed waste stream that talks about what's in there. We did have people talk about what kind of technologies we wanted to use, and make sure that when we move forward on picking some technologies, that we were going to have positive impacts on all three pillars that were mentioned in what Peter talked about earlier, on the community, on the environment, and the economy. And it seemed at first glance that if you talked about environment and economy, that you could very easily find particular things that would assist you in moving those forward. The community side, we knew that community acceptability was a big question, but we looked for how we can actually grow a healthier community through better waste management systems as well. And we're persuaded that they were latent in the multi-criteria assessment tool that had been created earlier in the process, but that with some more specifics in it, that it could be very valuable. So there's an exercise that produced a very specific set of criteria under the multi-criteria assessment tool that was then used to go forward to look at what might be the technologies that were of interest to us. So between August and now, we have worked to do that refinement on the multi-criteria assessment tool, which would then guide us in the selection of particular technologies. So first we rolled out a request for information, and then there'll be a follow-up on that as well. And I won't compete with David, who's going to take you through fine detail in a way that I probably can't tell you, but I want to say that the goals of refining the multi-criteria assessment tool were to make sure that we scaled this to meet the needs of our community, and scaled it to meet the changing needs of our community in the context of a waste-free Ontario, which would mean that we might not, for instance, commit in a monster that might require feeding, as Sweden has done. Sweden, sort of a model of how you go towards zero waste very quickly, but developed a model that now requires them to import waste. So we wanted something that can be scaled down as garbage is reduced. That's mandated by the Waste-Free Ontario Act and is encouraged by those things. And we wanted to have something that would fit our needs short and long term, and that therefore was adjustable, scalable, and modular. And I'll turn it over to David to take you through the fine detail on that in his report.
Thank you very much, Brian. So we've reached an exciting milestone in being able to present a preferred waste recovery and reduction technology approach to the community tonight. One we feel will drastically reduce the amount of waste material that we're currently landfilling in Oxford County. So before I get into the technology, I just wanted to discuss a few considerations which heavily influenced our decision-making in determining what the preferred technology approach is. So earlier, Peter and Brian mentioned a number of sustainability and environmental drivers that support this guiding principle that you see in front of you. And essentially, this is the principle on how we should be developing a preferred waste management system, with the primary focus being on waste prevention at the source, along with maximizing opportunities for material reuse, recycling, and or converting waste into other marketable end products, including the possibility of energy end products. with obviously the least desired option being disposing waste into landfill. So in selecting our preferred waste recovery and reduction technology, we gave significant consideration to both the type and the amount of waste that we're generating in Oxford County. And the slide that you see in front of you here is essentially a breakdown of that composition, which I'll speak to. So we currently carry out municipal curbside collection schemes for blue box recycling, leaf and yard waste, and garbage from all single-family residents, and as well as a few multi-residential buildings in households across the county. From this, you can see there's about approximately 7,300 tons of blue box recycling materials that we are exporting out of the country to out of the county to a separate end market processor. So that's the amount that's basically being effectively taken out of the garbage at the source before it even reaches our landfill. In addition, we have a number of private sector waste contractors that collect a significant amount of industrial, commercial, and institutional waste, as well as some garbage and recycling materials from other multi-residential buildings. So for this composition, you can see that a substantial portion of this industrial, commercial, and institutional waste that's collected by private service contractors is directly exported out of the county. So that's this pink ring here to the tune of about 21,000 tons of waste. And that's generally directly exported and disposed at private landfills outside of the county, largely driven by lower cost and in terms of tipping fee pricing. So overall, you can see then of the waste that's generated in Oxford, approximately 28,300 tons of waste is actually exported out of the county. So the remainder of the mixed solid waste that's generated in the county is actually delivered to our waste management facility in Salford. So for 2017, you can see this blue ring here. That was the total amount of waste that was brought to our waste management facility to the tune of 63,000 tons. Mainly comprised of leaf and yard waste, curbside garbage from the residential sector. We also received some industrial, commercial, and institutional sector waste, such as packaging, food waste, certain plastics, electronic waste, along with construction and demolition waste materials, such as wood, steel, concrete, and also we received certain municipal waste that are generated, such as biosolids, street sweepings, and tree trimmings. So you can see of that 63,000 tons that we receive at our waste management facility, we're currently quite effective at diverting 1/3 of that from being landfilled. So that's that portion in the green outer ring there. And largely the materials that we're salvaging there are recycling blue box materials that can be reused. Again, we're looking at that green semicircle. Also biosolids, we tend to be able to directly apply that on land so that it's not designated for landfill. As well, we reuse a lot of construction and demolition waste materials. There's electronics as well that we were able to repurpose, as well as processing a significant amount of leaf and yard waste. From that, it's further estimated that at a minimum, there's approximately another 1/3 of the residential curbside garbage that could be diverted from our landfill by simply separating out food and organic waste. Similarly, in the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, there's approximately 2/3 of that garbage and waste that could be further diverted from our landfill for the same reasons of separating out certain recyclable materials, as well as separating out food and organic waste. So what I'm getting at is those two facts alone really provide a number of significant opportunities for us when we're considering what the right type of waste treatment technology is to optimize getting that type of waste out of our landfill. And I'll be speaking to those a little bit further in the presentation. So this is kind of the keynote slide here in terms of the preferred waste recovery and reduction technology that we feel will get us to the year 2100. Just before I touch on that, I wanted to highlight the fact that we do have the existing municipal blue box program in operation. That will certainly continue to be run and expanded over time as the preferred means, as this is the preferred means to separate recyclables out of the waste stream, and that's again at the source of the waste before it comes to our waste management facility. So that will be ongoing. Similarly, the use of our residential backyard green composting systems will continue to be promoted across the county to help reduce that amount of food and organic waste from entering the waste stream. So everything I'm going to speak to here in this slide is referring to a process that's going to run in parallel to those other two programs that I've just mentioned. So how does this technology work? Essentially, we use a front-end process called enhanced material recovery. So again, any of that mixed waste stream that I mentioned earlier in the pie chart, whether it's residential waste or institutional, commercial, and industrial waste, that's what's being brought to our waste management facility. So the 41,000 tons of material I noted earlier, that needs to be processed up front through what we're calling a technology that's known as enhanced material recovery. And essentially what that process does, it mechanically shreds, sorts, and separates that incoming mixed waste into 3 different outputting streams based on the size, the type, and the physical properties of the waste. So the first outputting stream you can see here is a stream that we're calling residual waste. And that's basically waste that essentially has no end markets, no marketability. It can't be further recycled, it can't be reused, nor can it be composted effectively. So that's really one of the keys that's linked to the zero waste plan that was referred to earlier in the presentation, that if we're to extend the service life of our landfill from 2063 to 2100, we need to make sure this fraction of the incoming waste is controlled to a level of 10% or less. And what will help us along the way with reducing that 10% amount, we fully expect there to be other alternative end markets emerging over time, so that some of the non-marketable materials that we're landfilling now may in fact have usable markets down the road. Further, we expect legislatively to be a number of potential waste product bans through the Ontario Waste-Free Act. There's a number of items such as packaging items, styrofoam, certain plastics, batteries, corrugated cardboard, to name a few. Those are all in the mix of potentially being banned from landfill across Ontario. So that's essentially that first main output stream from the enhanced material front-end process. And then you can see the remaining 90% of that incoming mixed solid waste is channeled into either a recyclable and recoverable material stream, which is in that light blue fragment, or into what we're calling an organic stream. So just to focus on the recyclable and the recoverable material stream, that's again where we're looking at salvaging useful resources such as metals, plastics, paper, lumber, construction and demolition, all highly marketable and valuable end market materials. And getting those out of the waste stream for repurposing, again, either through reuse, recycling, or regeneration into other products. Then you can see in the darker blue output stream, this is how we're proposing to manage organics going forward. And that will be through a process known as biological treatment, where these organics are either treated inside the county or outside of the county at using any number of technologies shown there, ranging from dry or wet digestion to aerobic composting. And the nice thing with that process is, again, You're creating end product resources that can be reused if it's biosolids or fertilizers that can be repurposed for agricultural purposes or land application. There's opportunities to capture processing off gas and reconvert that into renewable biogas, which can serve many functions and help offset the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. Essentially, we're capturing carbon in that regard. So that's a number of the unique features of this preferred technology is one that it really affords for resource recovery of useful materials and or other resources from things that might otherwise be landfilled as waste. And in doing so, again, we're generating a number of valuable end market products that can be utilized. It also, through this technology, it allows flexibility in that we can build it at various capacity and modular levels to adapt to both the type and the amount of waste that's being generated in the county. And as well, if you recall back to that pie chart, we looked at that 21,000 tons of industrial, commercial, and institutional waste that's currently being exported out of the county. This technology would also have the capacity to process that waste in county. So I think that's a good start on the technology. Just to kind of wrap up where we're at in terms of bringing this technology forward, we've obviously presented this to our Oxford County Council back on March. From there, as you know, obviously we've kicked off a 6-week public consultation engagement plan as of March 15th. That's through a series of outreach efforts such as tonight's public meeting. We've got a number to the tune of 4 different public open houses across the county during that time frame. And as was mentioned earlier, the Speak Up Oxford Online module will continue to be taking feedback. So where are we going with it? In addition to tonight, we really at this stage want to reach out. We want to seek whether or not this preferred technology resonates with our community and the public, and we want to engage you, get your feedback on whether or not this resonates with how you think the county should be managing its waste going forward. Following that, we'll collectively review and consider all of the feedback that we've received in order to finalize the recommended technology that we'll then take back to council later in June. And then we'd be circling back to the community at a later stage. So at that point, I'd like to turn it back to Alicia Evans, our facilitator, who will open up the floor for questions around the preferred waste recovery and reduction technology.
Thank you, David. So we now have until about 7:30 for you to share your thoughts, comments, and ask your questions regarding what you've heard tonight. But a few reminders before we do that. We have a microphone available for those of you in the room, and we do ask you to use it when you're asking your question. And I'll ask the panel to use the microphone when responding to the questions so that our viewers at home can hear everyone. When asking a question, please try to limit it to one at a time so that everybody gets an opportunity to ask their questions and that the project team has an opportunity to respond. I will take a few questions from the room, and then we will see if there's any questions from those who are at home, and we'll read those out loud. And once again, if you don't want to ask your question or comment during this period, there is time available following this to speak one-on-one with the project team, as well as you can submit your comments and questions through the survey that you have received, as well as through Speak Up Oxford. And one other reminder, please keep your questions and comments focused on the topic at hand this evening. As Warden Mayberry mentioned earlier, there are other waste-related issues that are of importance to this community. So if you would like to speak about any of those, please do so after this period with one-on-one with the project team. So for those of you in the room who have a question, please come up to the microphone that is is right at the front there, and we'll start there.
Thank you very much. Steve McSwiggan from Ingersoll. For one thing, I'd like to make a comment, and 3 years in the works, and I'm so glad that this committee and the council has decided to roll this out. I think it's a long time in coming. I've been asking for over those last 3 years about what's going on with the committee and what they're actually doing. So I'm glad that we're finally getting a chance to see what's been going on for the last year, or last 3 years rather. A couple of the things that I wanted to talk about, or at least I wrote down while, at least my own comments on what I'm seeing, it's a little vague, this entire plan. A lot of this stuff that we're doing, or that I'm seeing right now, other than the recovery center that you're proposing here, really we're doing that right now. We're recycling products. You're picking up all of our recyclables at our curb, and that's going to a facility that's being diverted somehow. We're also trying to compost ourselves with organics and that kind of things. Where the issue seems to be is with the ICIs and how we engage with the ICIs. Now, over the last 3 years, I've proposed a couple of things that we're already doing in Canada, especially out west. It doesn't seem to be, or doesn't seem to be coming through on what's going on in the committee or with the zero waste. A lot of the things that they're doing out west is incorporating bylaws, which this body can do now, and start to push ICI waste into a diversion program. Start creating bylaws. These are the kinds of things that this body can do, and the elected people can enforce. And also education. We need to educate the ICI people, or the commercial, the industrial, the institutional people, on how they can divert, how we are going to bring in bylaws in the next 5 years and these are the bylaws that we'll be bringing forward. How can we work with you in diverting your waste into our facility? These are the kinds of things I thought I would see tonight, that I would see, and that's why I'm a little bit disappointed.
Okay, let's give an opportunity for the panel to respond.
Could you clarify what ICI is, please?
Certainly. So just as an overall, ICI is industrial, commercial, and institutional. So it's the hospitals, the schools, the industries, and the commercial entities within our community. To Stephen's point, in terms of bylaws that we can put in place from a municipal standpoint, this body, and to use Stephen's words, can only impose bans at our landfill site. We do not regulate ICI waste. It's regulated at the province. The zero waste, waste-free Ontario regulations that are proposed and working their way through process are in fact where those regulations are going to happen in terms of forcing the ICI sector to recycle and more significantly alter their waste streams. Same with material bans and packaging and so on. There's certain things that are at the provincial level of authority versus the municipal. What this program is trying to do is recognize that if we're to save our landfill site and extend its life out to 2100, and the Zero Waste Committee, and Brian perhaps can add to this in a minute, the Zero Waste Committee struggled and had a lot of conversation around waste reduction versus intervention at our landfill site. The waste reduction programs need to continue, and we've continued to work with Transition to Less Waste and others around the whole idea of reducing what we create in terms of waste. However, the fundamental problem as far as our landfill site is how do we intercept what's going across the scales at the landfill site and keep it from ending up in the landfill itself. And so the technologies, and yes, they're vague. I openly admit they're vague, and in part they're vague because we want the request for proposal process to actually govern the specifics around the technologies, the costs, and so on related to that intervention of what's going into our landfill right now and how we can, through technology, recover all of the resources that can in fact be recovered before they go into our landfill site. So the extended or the enhanced recycling or recovery facility is really a mechanical process to break out, separate the organics, metals, plastics out of the waste that's coming across the stream right now that we have no capacity, no mechanism to separate at the moment. That's a huge step forward. And then the other part of it is, okay, once you've got the organics, how do you deal with the organics? And again, the RFP process is what's going to give us the specifics around whether or not we use the digesters that we have within the county, whether we need other digestion capacity, or whether we use composting. That RFP process will help to define that.
Okay, thank you. You have another question? From the room? Yes.
I have a question. Mark Murray from Southwest Oxford. First of all, it's a lovely presentation, but I couldn't see the overhead. Will those two displays that David Stevens put up, will they be available?
Yes, they will be available. Are they? They're on the sheet as well.
No, not that one. The one showing how much, well, the one about, it was complicated. It was a bunch of circles, and then there was another one as well.
I suspect you're talking about that chart?
That one, and then there was another one as well.
Presentation material will be available. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. That's my first question. My second question, when you're talking about stuff that you're talking about the where this was going to happen, whether it would happen within the county or outside of the county. It seems to me that it's important for us to look after our own garbage as a philosophy of life. That Oxford County would actually look after the waste that is generated within Oxford County. And so my question is, when you say this facility, or you talk, it's, I know, vague, but my question is, why are we talking like that? Why aren't we talking about stuff that stays in Oxford?
Thanks, Mark. Do we deal with it inside the county or not inside the county is related to what the particular thing is. So if we recover all sorts of metal that happens to be steel, we have no steel processing facilities inside the county. And so what we do is we sell that to somebody that's producing steel in Thunder Bay or elsewhere. So the motion, however, that set this all going is that we would deal with all of the waste that we create in a way that is no longer waste. So in all of those processes to pull out things that have value, either as material or as energy sources, all of those then are, in the language of the ministry, they are recoverable resources. So there's a possibility that somebody outside the county may want to buy the plastics that we have separated out, may want to buy the metals that we have separated out. And so when those things happen, then those things go outside of our own boundaries. But what we do is we don't impose on somebody else the burden of dealing with waste as such. We offer them the opportunity to have resources.
We would be actually sorting it ourselves, because I understand contaminated waste is a problem.
It is.
That's why China doesn't want our stuff anymore.
They particularly don't want hazardous waste mixed in with those, so you're quite right.
We don't either.
And that facility that's in the slide that is currently up is to do more with sorting out the valuable things and to get 90% out of what is currently not being sorted so that it becomes.
So when we did the initial technology assessment, we also asked SLR, who was our consultant at the time, to kind of give us a range of what it would cost capital-wise and what the operating costs would be. So the range they came up with would be somewhere in the $8 million to $30 million for the capital cost to build the building, set up the digesters, and then approximately somewhere between 75 to 150 a ton to process the waste. Now those are quite large ranges, which we will have to see which ones actually come to fruition when we go to the actual RFP process.
Not to take away from what David talked about as well, the idea of the RFP process is we expect a public-private partnership here. We don't expect that we will have to pay for the whole nickel, so to speak, in order to be able to implement the technologies. The idea of the RFP process is, yes, we're going to have to put some money into this. We're going to provide the lands, but we also expect through a long-term operating contract that there will be a stake in it from a private industry perspective as well, and it'll be a long-term partnership.
I noticed that was on the questionnaire that was on the website, but that wasn't mentioned tonight. Now that you've raised the public-private partnership deal, I just want to say that I don't like it, and I would be opposed to it because it hasn't worked successfully, and I'm not sure that that's an adequate way of dealing with it. Nobody should be making money off of our garbage. We should be dealing with it ourselves.
The idea of the partnership is essentially the whole development of the technology. So those that are providing the technologies, making sure that there is skin in the game from their standpoint over a long period of time helps to ensure that it's not just a technology that can't be delivered over the long term. And it's one of the things that council obviously is going to have to look at. When we do the RFP process, there'll be different options related to that. But our hope is that we'll be able to balance the combination of costs, control of the output, and to what I think is your point, we want to make sure that whatever that relationship looks like, that there's a long-term commitment and a long-term opportunity to make sure that we get what we expect to get out of the process.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Michael. Will your plan be peer reviewed?
I can answer that too after you're done. The short answer is yes. The longer answer, which is my specialty, is that that's the reason why SLR has been working on this, that we've done the comparative among the various kinds of information that are available in terms of systems, that we will do the comparative through the RFP, and that we have used the multi-criteria assessment tool to make sure that this is reviewed in such a way that it delivers benefits in every pillar for everybody in Oxford County.
Do we have any other questions from the room? Yes, you could come up to the microphone.
Hi, Howard DeJong from Ingersoll. Just a couple of questions as to how you plan to proceed on a couple of things. We know that recycling of lumber, construction materials, that kind of stuff, but it can't be used unless, as Tim just told me, for birdhouses possibly, or a couple of small projects. Do you have any plans of altering the building code to allow for used products?
I'm not aware that that's come to the table in regards to discussions around Ontario Building Code improvements. That being said, we have heavily been engaged with the province in providing governance suggestions and ideas around the building code. One of the opportunities we were trying to center on, and it goes back to perhaps that more complex circular diagram I showed earlier, but was how to tackle a lot of the waste that's generated in the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, especially with respect to the multi-residential buildings.
Yeah.
So if you look at the building code right now, there's really nothing in there that's forcing multi-residential buildings to look at forms of source separation of their waste, whether it's recyclable material, organics, and other.
As it sits presently, if the general public within the county wanted to build a garden shed, they would have a bylaw officer come visit them if they used recycled materials. In some situations, if they needed a building permit of any nature. So it is, if we want to reuse as much as possible, we need some activity in that regard to free that up.
So thank you very much for that question and for the notion that we would advocate with the province to move forward and better what they're already doing in legislation, right? So we've done that around the Waste Free Ontario Act very aggressively, and we could do that around building code as well. And I don't know whether I should confess to this in public or not, but I have actually used recycled lumber to build things and have not been convicted of any crimes, despite the fact that one of those was a guillotine. On a more serious note, I would point out that you don't have to go very far south of here to run into a company that's called TreeCycle Incorporated that in fact is recycling lumber of various kinds and is using it. And also that I'm aware whenever I go shopping for furniture that upcycling of lumber results in it being of more value than when it was removed from a construction site. And I would advocate that we need to talk in the language that they talk in San Francisco, that you don't demolish buildings, that you deconstruct them. And then all of those elements that are wooden can then be reused and are frequently highly valued.
Yeah, there's many other functions for the product, no doubt. Is there any plans for, we've discussed before, of allowing the public to reuse products and how that would be done at county facilities? Because presently I don't believe that's allowable.
Yeah, there's a lot of municipalities that have started like partnerships with like Habitat with Humanity for Humanity of getting some of the stuff out. Typically that's where we point people to. There's been a lot of liability issues with people, you know, they take a microwave out of, you know, we take it out of the garbage stream, you take it home, it burns your house down, you know, it comes back to the County of Oxford, right? And there's been municipalities that have shut down their programs because of those issues. So our plan is to pull those materials out at a wholesale and a large scale. So in the wood case, we'd rather ship out a whole 50-yard container full of wood to someone that can recycle that whole 50-yard container than have 3 people come and pull 3 2x4s out at a time.
Makes sense. How do you plan to attack the 21,000, 23,000 tons that are leaving the county at present if we're going to increase the costs by mandatory going through this way? I understand that. But when that's already going by private contractor, how do you, outside the county, how do you plan to interrupt that stream and make it mandatory to be dealt with here?
That's where we really, really have to work hard on the province to put some rules in place to make it not so easy to move garbage around from Oxford County to somewhere else. We really, as a municipality, can't force people to bring their material to our site.
True, but there are financial ways of making it more attractive or less attractive to use local or outside facilities.
Oh, absolutely, but we'd have to visit that through the public consultation process to decide if people are willing to pay that extra to bring that waste back in.
Okay.
There's only one way to get it, is either when it drives over the scale or someone else provides it for them.
Yep.
Okay, I'm just going, are you have any more questions?
No.
Okay, great. So I'm going to take a couple questions from our viewers at home. So Michael asks, what other jurisdictions have successfully engaged in this process that would allow the public to determine cost and predictability?
I'll take this. I can do this one. So some of the technologies that we're proposing here, such as the anaerobic digestion, either the dry and wet, are systems that are in place now that are actually being used for source separated organics for people that are putting material from green bin programs through there. Composting programs are quite common in Ontario. The biggest one would be the actual mixed waste facility processing. We would be probably one of the first ones in Ontario to do it, but there is quite a large plant in South Carolina that does about 50 tons an hour of mixed waste coming in, which they're separating out basically into the same streams we're doing here. And The state of Maine is actually in the process right now of building a plant that will do 180,000 tons per year of mixed waste processing.
Okay, so I just noticed that did you want to?
Sorry, I might just add to that. Further to Dave's comment, if you look at the one technology around the wet anaerobic digestion, there's actually opportunities potentially right here in the county to use our own municipal wastewater treatment plant anaerobic digesters and consider some form of a co-feed using the organic material as a feedstock. So Stratford, similarly, they've got a process that they're currently designing, albeit of integrating source-separated organics into a municipal wastewater treatment plant digester for the same processing capability. So those are very well-proven, well-established practices. In terms of the dry anaerobic digestion, you don't have to go too far to see that employed as close as Niagara Region. There's a major processing center there for the dry anaerobic digestion. And then I think we've all seen the multiple windrows of anaerobic compost rows across many different parts of the province.
Okay, thank you. I have a note on my paper here that the handheld mic is not working well. Is it better now? No? Should I use the mic? Okay. Okay, so the next question we have is from Natasha. Will this plan generate jobs in Oxford County?
Yeah, I don't want to just give a simple yes. The process of separating mixed waste in an EMR involves things like there'd be robotic sorters, there'd be optical sorters, but it also does require some manual sorting. So there would be all levels of jobs from manual sorting, but also quite technical jobs in, running that equipment, making sure that equipment is separating the material properly. And then there's also the jobs that will be created from transporting the recovered materials, operating the digesters, and just processing the material that comes out of the EMR.
Just to further that, I think I touched on it during the presentation as well, but there's absolutely nothing stopping the emergence of a lot of end markets cropping up within the county to use a number of these end product resources that we've touched on earlier, whether it's again, any form of recoverable or reusable material. So I think that in its is another big bonus of potentially applying this technology.
Do we have any other questions from those in the room? Yes, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic.
This system addresses both domestic and institutional waste. I think those of us who walk around the town and go out on trail walks see the amount of single-use beverage containers and other waste that's willingly thrown down by people. I'm wondering how that can be captured and put into this waste stream, because it seems to be getting worse. I've been walking around here now for about 5 or 6 years, and I'm just finding that there's almost like a comet's tail of garbage being thrown down everywhere, and it's quite a serious problem. And I'd just like to know, it may be a slightly out of kilter question for tonight, but I'd be interested to know how you can capture that and put it in the rightful place, as opposed to just seeing it pushed into watercourses and other ways of the nature would dispose of it, either improperly or properly.
So the first part of that is trying to educate people to at least put it in a receptacle or put it someplace that it's going to. So currently that would go into a receptacle and it's going to go into the curbside collection vehicle, the same as what your household stuff does, the park stuff, anything like that. So that's one of the great benefits of this system. So instead of that truck just backing up to the tipping face at a landfill, it will back up to the enhanced material recovery building and dump its load there, and then it will be sorted again, so that coffee cup will go into a recyclable stream, the paper will go into a recyclable stream, and it ends up going through as a resource instead of going straight into landfill. So as long as we can get it into some kind of conveyance vehicle that actually gets it to wherever we're going to build this building, whether it is at the current waste management facility or somewhere else in the county, as long as we can get it into that vehicle and get it there, that gives us the opportunity to at least recover it.
Just a sort of supplementary observation is that I think the problem is going to be with waste and even and recycling is that even with the best will in the world, some of us find it very difficult to make our conscience clear by recycling and treating our waste properly. And I'm thinking that the amount of waste I see laying around, let's say single-use beverage containers and all that type of stuff, that it's going to be a very serious, a difficult problem to educate people enough to be absolutely, rigid in their recycling habits and not throwing waste down. And this is what I see as one of the biggest challenges. It's not so much the controlled waste, it's the uncontrolled stuff that is going to be the big problem.
Yeah, and thanks again for that. And it is a serious concern. It's a huge concern, and it affects our watercourses and therefore our lakes and rivers and oceans, and that's having impact on the planet. So it is a serious problem, and it's a problem that the Ministry of the Environment in the Waste Free Ontario Act and the subsequent strategy have suggested they would address through what they call social marketing. And that would be a very powerful attempt to change people's mind about what you do with something that's in your hand and that you've acquired and that you then are no longer going to use. And if littering could be eliminated, I think everybody in the room would be happy, and so would I. And to do it will require not just education, but it will require something similar to what was done about can I or can I not smoke in the presence of infants. So that kind of thing where it becomes socially unacceptable to do so.
Yes, you can. Yes, we have another question in the room, and then we'll take a question from online.
I'd like to follow that same line of thinking and possibly put it just off on a bit of a tangent. I find it absolutely ludicrous when I go into a fast food restaurant in Oxford County or many other places. And how are we going to teach the population to be responsible or respectful when everything goes in the garbage in our fast food restaurants, when recycling is a possibility right then and there? I think a serious change needs to happen there. And possibly when our kids go into these fast food restaurants, they would actually see that it is required. It's a necessary first step in my point of view.
Yeah, just further to your comment, as part of our new waste management facility administration building, we have incorporated a classroom into that building. So our goal is to get the kids into the waste management facility to see, what actually goes on there and what's happening with the stuff they're throwing out. I think that's a very good start. If we can change the attitudes of our young, they're very quick to change the attitudes of their parents. We don't want this to become a system, though, where people think they can just put everything in a bag and it goes away. Again, if we go back to David's slide of the hierarchy, the main thing we want to do is prevent, right? We want to prevent making the waste in the first place. If we can prevent most of the waste from even happening in the first place, it's the cheapest solution. It's the easiest solution to not having to spend all the money to do all this processing. The processing part is basically, it's the last thing before we actually put it into a landfill. So we want to make sure we do all the other things first. We want to make sure we're using our blue box. We want to make sure we're using our green cones and our composters at home if we can. We identified through the waste audit that there was still a lot of recyclable waste. It's hard to believe with $2 bag tags that people still want to throw recyclables into a garbage bag. So this allows us to capture that last little bit, but hopefully we'll get to the point where there are no more recyclables in that garbage bag, and that garbage bag gets so small that our processing, costs and our processing time here will be next to nothing.
If I could just add to that a little bit, and there's no question there's two aspects. One is waste reduction and how to focus on waste reduction and, as David said, avoiding the creation of it. One of the things that the Zero Waste Committee had to grapple with right early on, though, was if we really want to extend our landfill site out to 2100, we have to do a major intervention on what's going in the landfill site by 2025, or at the rate that it's being filled, we won't be able to make it. And so a lot of this effort and a lot of what you're seeing tonight is about the intervention of what's coming across the scale today, knowing very well that we've got to reduce the overall generation of waste over a period of time. The issue here, though, was we don't have the luxury of time to be able to extend our landfill site to the significant amount that we want to.
And I'd just like to add one more thing, that as consumers, we all have power to change those places that we do business with. And that was one of the things that worked extremely well in Scandinavia when people rejected packaging. And that's something that I know that happens already in Oxford County, and we could ramp it up. When people say at the place where they're going to consume a beverage, "I'll have that in a China cup, please."
Okay, so we have a question from Tim. Question and comment: where will the recyclables go? China does not want unseparated recyclables.
So essentially, we'd be looking at destinations for recyclables to any possible end market processing contracting firms. Obviously, through the municipal blue box program we have currently, all of our recycling materials are processed in Brantford, as an example. Is it possible that we may have more local capabilities to process recyclables? As I mentioned earlier, those sorts of businesses could certainly emerge and crop up within the county over time. It's just a matter of whether or not we have a collective threshold of material that everyone can viably make a go at.
And just to add to that, with the introduction of the Circular Economy Act by the Government of Ontario, if I produce a plastic bottle, it'll become my responsibility to put money towards making sure that's recyclable somewhere. So that's part of the whole process is, you know, things can be recycled, but it costs money. So if we're putting money towards the actual recycling processes, they will pop up.
Okay, another comment or a question. Sweden was called a monster because it is importing waste. Is that the reason that their waste technology, widely used in Europe, was overlooked?
The European technologies that are basically using different forms of incineration, those technologies weren't overlooked. They were screened out through the multi-criteria assessment tool. At the end of the day, the incineration technologies weren't deemed to be what this community was looking for in terms of its broad commitment to economy, community, and environment.
We have another question from the room.
Ted Komisky, Mayor of Ingersoll. It's not as much a question as it is a comment, and that is necessity is the mother of invention. If we want the cheapest way to dispose of our garbage, then let's just keep burying it. We know it's going to be an expense. We know it's going to be a cost. We have decided that for future generations, we're going to look after them one way or another. When I say that necessity is the mother of invention, when you can no longer bury it, when that is ruled out, then we're going to find multiple directions on how to handle the products we have, whether we don't manufacture them to begin with, or we can find other means to dispose of them through constructive use. So it's just a comment on it that there are ideas that this will not be cheaper. It will not. It'll be more expensive, but that's our direction. Our direction is to no longer use landfills at Oxford County or anywhere else in Ontario, anywhere else in Canada, hopefully anywhere else in the world. And when it comes to products that we're going to find, there's going to be different individuals that are going to be coming forward and saying, I can use this product. That product may be outside our county. And so there may be few counties, quite a few counties, going to that source or going to that use to be able to have them use that product. So there will be transport of products outside of the county, but it won't be to landfill. It'll be for a useful end product. Just comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have another question in the room? Yes.
Just an observation that I think it's within the power of the municipalities to actually put a tax on single-use items like bottled water or cups. You could just say to consumers, you're renting the use of this cup, and you get, when you return it, you get another nickel back, because that worked with bottles long before the pop industry went to cans and to plastic.
So essentially that's the basis of a European model that happens where all the time, where there's that notion that you're going to use it and it's going to be returned and reused. And that's a really valuable one. And my congratulations to the people of Transition to Less Waste here in the county who have done significant work with that notion that people will not have throwaways in their hands, that they will have a reusable in their hand, and that they will then return it, and it will get used again and again. So that's a very successful European model that we could look at.
If I could just add to that too, municipalities don't have the authority to tax a water bottle, for example, in the province of Ontario. Some provinces have gone to a full, what's it called, deposit return system. Alberta, for example, has a much more extensive deposit return system than Ontario does. As Dave referenced earlier, however, Ontario has gone more to a product stewardship role where the price of how to deal with that product at the end is incorporated at the front end when they buy the product, and the responsibility of the steward who created the product, rather than at the back end and a tax added onto it.
So we have another question from online. Why don't we opt for a green bin program instead of sorting through garbage bags?
I'll take one of the easier ones. Green bin programs aren't necessarily 100% effective. Some of the organics still end up in the waste stream, still requiring the process that we're proposing here. So that's the county's objective or initiative has been to promote the backyard green composters, and then a system that would separate the waste at the waste management facility. Anything else to add?
I'm just going to. Yeah, typically what happens in green bin programs is everybody goes gung-ho for the first 6 months, and then they get that first day in August when they open up the bin, and it's not the most pleasant thing in the world, and they go back to putting the organics into a garbage bag. Like Waterloo has basically a 50% participation rate in their green bin program. So we're hoping that through this process, we're going to get 100% of the organics that are left in the waste stream, and then we'll be dealing with them. And then also this allows us to also accept organics from the IC&I sector, so something like a Sobeys grocery or a Zayre's grocery or a small restaurant or whatever, their organics would come in through their bin, and we'd separate that organics out when it comes into the EMR. Oh, yeah, sorry. And the final thing, when we did approach the subject of implementing a program in Oxford County as part of the waste management strategy, and the cost was expected at that time, which is like 5 years ago, to be $2 million a year.
Do we have any other questions from anyone in the room? Yes, sir, if you could come up to the microphone.
I like the webinar part, because I already got 2 questions answered. So, one thing I'd like to thank the Zero Waste Committee, because I asked
Mayor Komisky if we could have, I helped to build a dog park, and I asked Mayor Komisky if I could have 2 green bins or green cones, and he brought me 3, which is awesome. And we installed those, and they worked so well. One of the ladies down there donated 2 more. Brian helps out at Stitch, which is a local community meal. I don't know, what do you call this? It's a miracle is what it is, but it's, we take the recyclables from there, the compostables from there, the chicken bones and everything else, and we feed them through there. We've probably put 1,000 gallons worth of compost from Stitch through these cones, and I bet you there's might be 120 gallons left sitting in there, not counting all the dog poop that goes in there. Plastic bags and not. They're really crappy design as far as using anything with a plastic bag in it, but we've modified that, so there'll be a study in the next couple of months when it warms up, and we'll see how well our that green cone part has worked. I see 1 truck going to this facility. Does that mean there's no blue boxes?
So perhaps I didn't spend enough time on it during the presentation. Just to reiterate, this technology here would certainly be built in a full complement to our existing municipal blue box collection program.
So there's still a blue box?
Correct.
Okay. Now, in the blue box system, some of us have sat here and we've asked about using clear recyclable bags and for our blue box stuff. And every time we ask that, the county comes out to their contractor and we get big orange stickers on our bags to say, no, you can't put bags in a facility. And now we have a facility here that's going to take green bags and separate all this stuff out. So that's just a comment. You don't have to answer that part. But now I was curious about that. So this is just for the green, this is just for the curbside stuff. And the purpose is to extend the landfill past 2100, right? That's the whole purpose of this.
So the current life expectancy of the landfill is estimated at 2063. To Peter's point earlier, if we're unable to implement a technology like this by the year 2025, we're going to be unsuccessful in achieving our zero waste target of extending the landfill to the year 2100.
But if we could extend the landfill to 2100, that's the ultimate goal, right? Correct. Yes.
Correct.
So one of the things with landfills is that you bring in all these cubes of air, you smash them down with this great big huge thing with balls on them, and there's still a lot of volume left. Now that volume creates spots for air, which you don't want because it can catch fire, creates spots for leachate. One of the things that's out there that you can implement next week, while it might take you a while to pour a foundation, is to shred everything that goes in there. You can create 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times the volume in a landfill by shredding the waste before you go through there. The other part of it is that you can take that waste stream and you can separate out the metals, you can separate out the recyclables, and you don't need all these electronic sorting devices and everything else. It's one single stream. You can also take that shredder, put it on in a portable device, just like they do for wood chips and everything else, and bring it to a lot more waste transfer stations so that we don't have to plug up our curbs in Ingersoll for 6 weeks with junk and couches and everything else. So you have a transfer station in Ingersoll where the shredder comes in and it just shreds everything and makes a reduced volume. It's very simple technology. You could probably put one in for $2 or $3 million for our waste stream. You cannot run that facility on the waste stream for Oxford County. It would be impossible. You'd have to have partnership with other people, even with the commercial stuff. And, you know, like, to do it cost effectively, it's you know, these are other things it could do. You say, well, you know, was this considered? I don't know. It was mentioned. And, you know, it's all about volume, right? And when you get into a shredding, if you do it twice or 3 times, you don't even need daily cover. So you've got that aspect of it. So these things are out there. Then you can go back one more step, and you can go into the sustainable landfills, where they're aerobic landfills, which they're trying out in Fort McMurray, and they actually decompose themselves. And they don't create the methane but you actually inject, not like Walker explains it, oxygen. You inject air into the system, so you create an aerobic process which does not have the smells and everything else. So we're traveling on a very expensive line here, and we're not looking at the alternatives. And it says right up there, preferred technology. So that, to me, that means this is what we've decided, and no sense asking questions.
So I did hear a question there that was, were these considered, or was this considered?
Yes.
So I can speak to a few elements of that. In terms of the capability of the amount of waste this facility would need to operate, one of the keys and why it was brought forward is that it could be built at various modular stages based on the type and the amount of waste that's being brought to it. So I wouldn't necessarily agree that this facility cannot run and operate on the amount of waste that's generated in Oxford, first of all.
Cost effectively?
Well, second of all, it's certainly something that we'll explore in much greater detail when we move to the request for proposal stage in terms of determining what that economical sweet spot is for the sustainable operation of the facility.
Because into that shredding part, we have Carmoose, who's actually looking at burning processed waste,
Right.
which is municipal waste. Lafarge, I think it was 15 years ago, they had, and I thought it was so cool. They're nice little 2 briquettes, right? Look like big kitty litter sort of thing, right? And I thought, well, what a great idea. They take out all the aggregate and all the stuff that won't burn, and then what's left over, and cement kilns are an interesting thing, and it's, you know, that's something that you can do. So you can start, you know, if you want to go to that way, because I'm sure there's shredding technology involved in that.
Absolutely, there is.
Let's buy a shredder.
Yeah.
Let's buy a shredder, get it in there. We still have, I think, $4.8 million in the slush fund. Let's get one going, you know. They're out there.
Yeah, to buy a shredder, yeah, it's not cheap. A garbage shredder, yeah, no, it would be somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range for a shredder.
Yeah.
The process, we could not make it portable. The MOE would never let us grind garbage mobily. It'd have to be done at the site. They would never let you move that around and just garbage, you know, shred garbage at a site. The permit process for that would just be impossible. It would increase somewhat the compaction, but we do compact our garbage when it comes in. We do survey our garbage, so we know what our compaction densities are, and we have very good densities on our garbage and our waste when we put it into our landfill. We know what that is already. But yeah, this process is talking about, you know, taking that garbage apart, whether it be shredding it, whether it be ripping it, whether it be robotically pulling it apart. That is exactly what we're talking about in this process. But it just is, it's in a standalone one location.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, it's just something to do. And compaction, you know, density, whatever else, right?
Yeah.
You know, what you're dealing with right now is mostly municipal waste, mostly bagged garbage.
No, typically we deal with IC&I garbage.
Not according to your
that
chart.
41,000 tons that goes in the landfill, there's only about 14,000 that's curbside municipal waste.
So you're still 2/3, 1/3?
Yeah.
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 Because that's one of the things when you have a high concentration of ICI waste, that's the stuff that's the hardest stuff to
The other thing with shredding waste, which is a real difficult thing, is people have a tendency to throw stuff in their garbage that they shouldn't. Right? So this system allows us to get those cans of paint out of there, those batteries, and that before we actually shred the waste and introduce it into the garbage stream, right? If you start taking, and it even happens in the curbside garbage bag, people hide all kinds of neat things in their garbage bag. It allows us to take that apart in a way that we can pull out that hazardous waste before it actually gets introduced into that organic stream.
And one final comment. I know that I don't really get listened to much, but when everybody comes up with an idea, to a T, we hear the province is involved with that. We don't have the power to do that. You have the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, which is one of the most powerful political organizations, and this stuff doesn't go to them.
Oh.
And if you have a problem with what the province does, then we should be out front and open and get a webinar or whatever else at the AMO and do this, because that's the biggest disappointment is every time somebody comes up with an idea, we're told why we can't do it, not why we can.
Yeah.
Or how can we do it?
Just as an example, though, of something that just recently did happen is the province just charged Stewardship Ontario to put together a plan going forward for the Blue Box program in Ontario. And based on comments that came from municipalities, came from organizations like the Ontario Waste Management Association, came from AMO, Stewardship Ontario could not get that plan together in time to present it to the minister. So it's actually put on hold until there's some further consultation on that program before it actually does get implemented out. So comments we do make, and we do make comments through council, through our staff, to EBR postings. We do quite a bit of actually lobbying towards the government on this stuff because it does affect the bottom line for the County of Oxford, and it's our one way of doing that.
Even though I disagree.
I'm going to jump here to speak because we are running short on time, and I do want to make sure that we hear this last question from our viewers, and I'm going to encourage you to continue this conversation after. Yes, and I'm moving over to the other mic. Okay, so we have one more question from online, and in several municipalities, clear plastic bags have been used to encourage waste diversion through public pressure and potentially refusing to accept. Is this being considered by the county?
So clear plastic bags on both the garbage side and the recycling side. We are currently in a contract with a company that does not want the garbage in the recycling in plastic bags because their system would just send that whole bag of material through the system without anybody doing anything to it because it's conglomerated. So they would have to basically manually rip open every bag, dump it out, make sure everything gets out of that plastic bag. Plus the plastic bag contributes to the garbage stream. So what we're asking people to do is to continue to use blue boxes. We really promote the use of the plastic lids. We have plastic lids that snap on the blue boxes now to keep stuff from flying out. So that's what we're working with right now on the recycling side. On the garbage side, yes, it would be great if we could look in that garbage bag and see a couple recyclables in there and then refuse to take the bag. Then we get into, okay, this week we leave one bag, next week it's still there, and then there's 2 bags, and then the next week after that it's still there, and we have 3 bags, and then it becomes, we have to send a bylaw officer in, we have to send, and of course no one claims ownership of it anymore. Plus there is somewhat of a privacy issue that some people feel that, you know, there's things going on in their life that they don't want everybody to know about what they're doing. So whether it be, you know, personal hygiene things, personal medications, stuff like that that's happening. Yep, Howard.
Should we continue the meeting format even though the filming may be over?
We are going to end this portion of the format for now, and we're going to carry on with one-on-one discussions with the presenters here. So we want to make sure we leave enough time for people to have those discussions who aren't comfortable speaking in front of everyone. So we do have to end this now, and I do want to make sure that the warden has enough time to do his wrap-up and that we leave enough time for others. So if I could ask you to just carry on the discussions after the wrap-up, okay? Okay, yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Howard. I'll get to that in just a second. So, first of all, I want to thank Alicia. Thank you to the presenters, to Oxford County staff, and thank you to Brian Smith for representing Zero Waste Oxford. I also want to thank the couple of elected representatives that are here, Opal, and of course the audience who's joined us here tonight and online. A couple of quick notes on this project before you leave tonight. Now that you've learned about the technology, the purpose of this exercise is to gather your feedback about the proposal. Before you go this evening, there are surveys that have been handed out. Please fill those out and leave it on the table with the county staff over there by the camera. If you'd like more time to read and think about this proposal, tonight's presentation is posted on the county's website at Speak Up Oxford. So I encourage you to go to oxfordcounty.ca and then look for the Speak Up Oxford icon. Tonight's meeting will be posted on the Speak Up Oxford website for those who missed the meeting or want to review it. There are 3 more in-person drop-in sessions around the county this month to take this recommended technology out to the community for feedback. So tomorrow night, Thursday, April 5th at Tillsonburg Public Library from 6 to 8 p.m. There'll be the same presentation. Then Wednesday, April the 11th at the Embro Public Library from 6 to 8 p.m. And finally, Tuesday, April 17th at the Princeton Library, and that's 2 to 4 in the afternoon. This proposed technology is open for your feedback through April 30th, so we encourage you to make your comments on Speak Up Oxford before then. The feedback will be taken into consideration in writing a proposal that will be coming to County Council in June to seek approval to potentially move towards an RFP process. Since I have people here, I'd also like to put in a plug for an event being hosted here in this room tomorrow night. If you're interested in learning more about renewable energy and passive house construction, the International Renewable Energy Academy is back in Oxford for a 2nd year, and there's a free presentation that is open to the public tomorrow night at 7:30 here in this room. More information is online at futureoxford.ca, and Oxford County staff have more information. Particularly over at the media table for this event tomorrow night. So as you leave, don't be afraid to ask them for it. I understand that just in the last few days, they've had a couple of new additions to the speaking lineup for the International Renewable Energy Conference coming from Iceland and Spain to talk about what's happening with renewable energy in their parts of the world. If you have further questions about the waste presentation and the proposal, Public Works staff, as was mentioned, will be around for the next half hour or so. So if you'd like to approach them with a question or comment, they are more than willing to have that discussion. Again, thank you for coming out and participating tonight. It's vitally important to the community to have residents who are engaged in helping us shape the community for future generations. Thank you all for sharing your time, and have a very pleasant evening. Thank you.